a delight. It's a good challenge again to chair the hustings for the second time. It was a surprise election last time, and it's a slightly surprise election this time, but it's echo Val's sentiments. It's really good to see so many people here this evening. I'm going to hand directly over to John Richardson, who has actually done all the background sort of work on putting tonight together. But before I do so, I'm getting signals from those in the hall that they can't hear. Just pass that to Mark at the back to see if you can do anything to sort that out. It's been noted. John.
Thanks very much. Am I working, Mark? Thank you, yeah. So far as I can tell, Churches Together has been organising hustings at general elections over the last 30 years, probably longer. We tweak it a bit, but we keep the same pattern. It's a slightly quaint thing to do in many ways in an age of fast-moving social media, but we'd like to do it again this time. And we've aimed to be as fair as we can in the following ways. All 5 candidates were invited, all accepted, then one, Peter Marshall of Advance Together, had to pull out due to work commitments. Secondly, the seating of candidates and the order in which they will make their initial presentations was drawn out of a hat, actually a flat cap, so even better. And that's the order in which they will speak to begin with, and how they're seated. The initial presentations were limited to 3 minutes each, with a warning bell at 2.5 minutes. Thank you. The answers to the questions were limited to 1 minute each, with a warning bell with 10 seconds to go. And I'm grateful to these young timekeepers who will be ruthless. In response to some requests, we'll have a short statement from the Green Party on why it has not put forward a candidate. That will be at the end of the main presentations. And regarding tonight's questions, we asked for them to be submitted via the Churches Together website, and we received close on 70. We only have time for 15 or 16 on a night like tonight, so we'll have to be selective. A few were on the same topic, so that was all right, we could composite them. Some were addressed to one candidate only, and we tended to avoid those. 1 or 2 were, well, let's say politically mischievous, so a group of us decided we wouldn't have those. Though I know from let's say strongly worded emails I've had, not everyone is happy at our choice, but most questioners have accepted this, and I think we will cover a reasonable range. We intend to send the unasked questions to the candidates after the hustings so that they are aware of the wider concerns and may even answer some of them, as they have in the past. And there may be time during the evening for some open comments from the floor. Let's see how the chair will decide that as we go through. A general point. The main aim of the evening is to hear the views of candidates on a range of topics so that our choice of MP can be more informed. We will no doubt hear views with which we profoundly disagree. I hope, however, that we will listen with respect. And I ask, as in previous years, there will be no personal abuse and no shouting down. I've been reminded that in 2017, I suggested that modest applause and gentle hissing of disapproval might be acceptable, so I better say that again. I also remind you that our chair, my vicar, has acquired the title of Canon since we last met, and though she is very friendly looking, she has good ammunition. That joke was pathetic. One final point. Thanks to a generous anonymous donation, this event is being filmed by Hitchin TV. Only the chair and the candidates will be seen, and the names and the voices of the questioners will be heard. They've all given their consent. The audience will not be seen, so put your hello mum signs down now, you will not be seen. And the film will be on YouTube, probably from Thursday morning. We're very grateful to Hitchin TV for making that possible. And last time it was seen widely, locally, nationally and internationally. And we hope this will happen again. Many thanks for coming. Thanks for your understanding. Have a great evening.
Thank you very much, John. So without further ado, we're going to move to the introductions of the candidates. As John said, we're going to start with Bim on my right, and we'll just go along the table. Each candidate has 3 minutes to introduce themselves. So times, are you ready? Bim, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Jane, and it's a pleasure to be here. It's been also a pleasure to serve as your Member of Parliament for the last 2.5 years. Tonight we're going to talk about a range of issues: the NHS, Brexit, education, a range of different things that many of you have wanted to hear about, quite rightly. But I wanted to start by saying that there is one big issue locally here that I believe can have a significant impact on this constituency if it goes ahead, and that is the expansion of Luton Airport. Luton Airport, which is currently 18 million, got a limit of 18 million passengers. The proposal by the Labour-run Luton Borough Council, which owns the airport entirely, is to increase it to almost double it, to 32 million, to get it approaching to the size of Gatwick. I believe that is not a good idea, not good for this constituency. It directly abuts this constituency. Let me explain why that is. The first is the traffic, road surface traffic. Our infrastructure in this largely rural constituency, anybody who's driven from Hitchin or through Hitchin down towards Cockenham, Mangrove Green, Tea Green, Beechwood Green, further south towards Lily and Offaly, will know that those roads are small. They are rural roads. This is not the place where we can easily double the traffic, in fact more than double once you account for the people working every day at the airport. This is not easy to do. It will significantly impact the lives of everybody in this constituency, Hitchin, in Harpenden, and in the villages surrounding it. So that's the first reason. The second reason is noise. Since I was elected in June 2017, I've had hundreds, if not thousands of constituents email me about the blight of air traffic noise over their homes, from all over this constituency. And the airport does not deal with their complaints properly. They brush them off, they don't treat them fairly. And then to propose to almost double the flights, I think would have a significant impact on the lives of thousands of people in this constituency. And the third is the environment. We all know about the impact of aviation on climate change, and we know how significant it is and that it is growing. But also the local environment. The particulates in the air from aircraft go into the air and go into our lungs, in particular young lungs, and kerosene from the planes also ends up in our constituency. To double that, I think would be have a significant negative impact. Therefore, for all of those reasons, I urge you to join and allow me to continue my fight to campaign against Luton Airport expansion. Thank you.
Sid,
okay, so I prefer to speak to the audience this side, standing up this time. Okay, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I'm glad to live in Hitchin. I'm probably the only candidate that walked to the hustings today and be part of the local church here. My wife and I have been involved in leading a number of parachurch events which have involved several churches in Hitchin, and I had the very honour of preaching in one church on Sunday, so I'm pleased to be here involved in the community. I'm also part of the North Hearts Friends of Israel and being involved in speaking with them, supporting Israel and such like. So it's a pleasure to be involved in the community here. Now, I believe every party has now issued its manifesto. We issued ours on Saturday. I believe the Conservative Party issued theirs on Sunday, and I've been reading them. Page 48 of the Labour Party manifesto. We will, it says, look after women's reproductive rights and we will decriminalise abortion. When asked what it means to decriminalise abortion, they made it clear it meant abortion up to birth. There was an article in a newspaper today which said, "I fear that Labour's abortion pleas could lead us to a very dark place." How deeply ironic, the party that makes a big deal about being pro-women will make it possible to abort girls on the basis of gender. Abortion is, whatever your view, a desperately serious moral question. It's quite literally a matter of life and death. And many who, for pragmatic reasons, are pro-choice and think it best that abortion be legal in order to be safe, will draw the line at what is tantamount to infanticide, late abortions up to birth. Now, I realise there's some people here, obviously, who support abortion up to birth. But I hope you will respect the rights of those who actually believe that if an abortionist has in front of them a 28-week baby, the only way they abort that baby is by taking a live baby out of a mother's womb and killing them. That is exactly what happens. To us, that is totally wrong. The Lib Dem manifesto also refers to decriminalising abortion up to 24 weeks. They also want to have zones outside abortion clinics where you cannot pray. A friend of mine recently was arrested for praying outside an abortion clinic. Religion is actually a protected characteristic under the Equality Act. So by banning prayer, what the Liberal Democrats are actually saying is that they're going to do something which is actually contrary to equality laws.
Thank you. Thank you, Sid. Sam.
Thank you. Driving rain, wind, fog, freezing fingers. None of these things have stopped me and the Lib Dem team from talking to thousands of you, tens of thousands in fact, over the last few weeks. And you've all been telling us the same things. You've been telling us you're fed up, that you're disappointed. You're fed up for being taken for granted. You're fed up of being ignored. You're fed up of this mess that's going on. You're disappointed in what's going on in Westminster, or you're disappointed in those who are supposed to represent you, ignoring your wishes, and you're disappointed in politics overall. It's time for that to change. My name's Sam Collins. I'm the Liberal Democrat parliamentary candidate for Hitchin and Harpenden, and with your support I'll be the next Member of Parliament for this constituency. And also with your support, that'll allow us to stop Brexit and build this brighter future, not just for the whole country but also for our area. But what does that actually mean? Well, stopping Brexit is pretty obvious. I'm the only candidate here that represents a purely Remain party. So if you want to remain in the European Union, then please vote Liberal Democrat on the 12th of December. But this election isn't just about Brexit. And the Lib Dems aren't just about Brexit. We're about a whole bunch of great things. We're about building a brighter future for our nation and our country, as I said. And that means tackling the climate crisis. It means much better funding for our schools. It means investing in the NHS properly, and mental health and social care. It means so much more, but I only have 3 minutes to discuss it, and we've got a whole hustings here to go. But if you want to help me build that brighter future for our country, then please vote Liberal Democrat on the 12th of December. But it's important to say to you that tonight you're going to hear a lot of promises from a lot of people about how they're going to spend money and all these great things they're going to do. But what they're probably not going to tell you, that if Brexit happens, they can't do any of these things. We have to stop Brexit and use the £50 billion Remain bonus effectively to do the things we want to do. And for me, personally, being elected as your Member of Parliament, or even here in Hitchin Highbury as your local councillor, it's a huge responsibility. It means being present. It means listening to you. It means being passionate about our area. And it means being very proactive. And I need to hear your concerns, what you care about, what you're passionate about, and it means acting on those concerns as well. So I'll always put you first, ahead of any party or career goals. I will be your local MP and your MP. So if you want someone who cares about our community, who cares about what you want and puts your interests ahead of anything else, then please vote for me on the 12th of December.
Thank you, Kate.
Thank you very much. Good evening. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Kate Hart. I am the District Councillor for Walsworth Ward in Hitchin. I was elected in May of this year. I've been working extremely hard since then on casework and my role as Deputy Executive Member for Environment, Leisure and Green Spaces at North Herts District Council. I am not what most people would think of as the normal sort of person that might get involved in politics. I became an accidental politician. When my children's school lost their deputy head teacher, who was our special educational needs coordinator, to redundancy last Easter, I suddenly realised quite how deeply austerity had cut. Shortly after that, there was an open letter published by 6 North Hertfordshire secondary school head teachers asking parents for their support because their calls to our local MP for support on funding issues had fallen on deaf ears.
Hear, hear.
That's the point at which I decided to do something about it. So I started a local action group, which many of you may have heard of. It started off as Hitchin Parents Against School Cuts, because that's exactly what we were. We then became Hitchin and Harpenden Parents Against School Cuts, and we now stand as Action for Education. And we have been campaigning for over a year for proper education funding across the spectrum, as well as a proper regulated assessment system that is fit for purpose. During this campaign, I spent a lot of time talking to people all over Hitchin. There are 1,200 people in our online action group, and that represents a fairly diverse set of views. People didn't just talk to me about education, they started asking me about why there were no dog bins, or why their bins weren't being collected properly, or who was in charge of cutting the verges and mending the potholes. And this is what made me realise how few local people have a genuine understanding of how politics works. So part of the reason I stood for district council elections was to try and encourage a greater degree of political education, particularly in young women, who there is a very low turnout for voting. After this, when my local led party asked for candidates for district elections, I put my hand up, because I think that if you can represent your community, you should. So that's what I did, and I was absolutely delighted to be selected to represent in May of this year. But actually, I think I have a bigger job to do, and that's to represent our constituency in Parliament. Our local people need a local voice to represent them. We haven't had one for 40 years, and it's about blooming time we did. We need proper investment in education and in all of our other public services, and I will fight for it tooth and nail. So please, on the 12th of December, seriously consider me as your MP for Hitchin and Harpenden and vote Labour.
I'm now going to invite Mary Marshall to come and read a statement from the Green Party.
Good evening. My name is Mary Marshall, and I'm here to explain on behalf of the local Green Party why we are not fielding a candidate in this election. We decided to join an electoral arrangement with the Liberal Democrats and Plaid Cymru to seek to unite the Remain vote. Similar electoral arrangements have been made in 60 constituencies across England and Wales. This decision was put to those Green Party members who lived in Hitchin and Harpenden and voted on in a secret ballot. In the Eastern region, the Liberal Democrats have stood aside in Bury St Edmunds in support of Green Party candidate Helen Geek, an eminent archaeologist who has appeared in Time Team. Recently, I travelled to Bury St Edmunds to reassure myself that we hadn't agreed to stand aside for no good reason. I'm glad I did, as I was lucky enough to work alongside her in 2 campaign events and learned how impressive an MP she would be. Greens are willing to work with other parties for the common good. Recent political events have already deeply damaged, so we are using the tools we have in seeking to protect the citizens of the UK. We believe this is the right thing to do for the people of Hitchin and Harpenden. We are not advising Green Party members, supporters or voters on how to vote. The UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has warned the world that global warming above 1.5 degrees will be catastrophic. As Extinction Rebellion are continually reminding us, we must reduce our carbon emissions within the next 10 years. The Green Party believes the best way to tackle this crisis on a large enough scale is through constructive participation in international organisations like the European Union. Please, carefully consider the other parties' manifestos, past records and current promises about climate change and social justice before you vote. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marion. We move now to the questions. Just a reminder, the question will be presented from the floor. If you are a questioner, please hold the microphone close to you when you speak into it. Each candidate will then be given a minute to respond to the question, and I'm going to vary the order in which I'm going to call on them to respond, so it's not always the first person. One person doesn't always go first. Each question has 5 minutes. So if the candidates speak for less than a minute each, I will then open it to the floor for short comments. If the candidates speak for a minute, and all 4 of them speak for a minute, then there won't be time to do that. So that's the rationale as to when I'll be able to open it to the floor and when we'll just need to move on to the next question. But can I ask, if I open it to the floor, please keep comments short so that as many people can comment as possible, and please remember to be respectful because we will take the microphone away from you if you're not, and the same for candidates. Right, so moving on. Our first questions are on Brexit. Interestingly, we didn't have very many questions on Brexit. That may say a lot, but we have selected 2 of them. So Robin Sternberg is going to ask our first question. Thank you, Robin.
If you're elected as RMP and there's a Conservative government, will you vote in Parliament against or for the government Brexit deal? And if there's a second referendum, will you vote Remain or Leave? And would that be a change of opinion from the first referendum?
Thank you very much, Robin. So we're going to start with
Yeah. Well, if there's a Conservative government, I will vote in favour of the Prime Minister's deal. I voted in favour of it at second reading when it went to Parliament. Before the election was called. And let me explain why. When I voted Remain in 2016, though that was before I was working in the city then. I wasn't a member of Parliament. But when I was elected in 2017, not in this room, but in the Zio Church opposite, I made it very clear that I would seek to uphold the result of the referendum and do so in an orderly way. That is what I tried to do in my first term in Parliament. That's what I will continue to do as well. So if there's a Conservative government, that's what I will do.
Thank you. Sid.
Okay, I would vote for the deal. It's not a perfect deal, but you have to understand that it sets in place an interim arrangement. See, it sets in place an interim arrangement, and what will actually happen is that we will properly leave the European Union in December 2020. But the reasons that I'm in favour of leaving the European Union are complete lack of democracy in the European Union. It's the Commission that controls the European Union, and it's unelected. There's corruption, there's 5% of the budget that goes missing every year, and the whole human rights thing has been completely misused. But in my opinion, the vital thing is that we uphold democracy. If we defy democracy and defy the referendum and say the referendum doesn't matter, what people think doesn't matter, it's what my party thinks that matters, that's a very dangerous path to go down. Our party says we must uphold democracy, we must implement the referendum, and we must do what the people have voted for.
Well, as the Unite to Remain candidate of the Liberal Democrats, who's endorsed by the People's Vote campaign, North Hearts for Europe, Harpenden for Europe, the tactical voting recommendation of Gina Miller and Best of Britain, my answer isn't going to come as a great shock. I would vote against the deal. Absolutely, we must remain in the European Union. The damage Brexit will do is catastrophic to our country, and those who vote in favour of this deal seem to be either ignoring or unaware of the fact it's no deal by stealth. It's a catastrophe for our country, and we must not support it.
Sam, your list of accolades is almost as long as Hitchin and Harpenden Parents Against School Cuts at Gmail. But it's not quite. I would vote against any Conservative Brexit deal. Boris Johnson's deal is dangerous, and it makes Theresa May's Brexit deal look like a walk in the park. I would also vote to remain. I voted to remain in the first referendum, and I would vote to remain in the second one. I do not believe that any deal, even one negotiated by us in the Labour Party, will provide us with the same protections and privileges that we enjoy as part of the EU. And so, in light of that, I would have to vote against it. And I would campaign further. I would campaign for remain in the future.
Very quick comments from the floor. So two hands up here. So if we can get the microphone as quickly as possible, that'd be great.
Can I ask our MP why he, in a letter to a constituent, said he would never, in any circumstances, countenance a no-deal outcome, and then, as soon as he was offered a place in the Johnson government, changed his mind?
Good to see you again. I'm afraid we did not end up with a no-deal outcome. So I'm afraid that is incorrect. Everybody said that the Prime Minister, in fact Amber Rudd, I had a big argument with her about it. Amber and Philip Hammond said, oh, he wasn't trying to negotiate a new deal, and he did. And he got a deal. And so that is the fact that a lot of the people, no, there's no point in listening, a lot of the people who said the Prime Minister was bent on a no deal have been proved to be wrong. He got a new deal, and that is why I support him. And in terms of the government, I'm not a minister. Being a ministerial aide is not a member of the government. You're not paid, you're not on the payroll in that sense. But that is beside the point. I supported it because I wanted to get a new deal with the European Union that could get through Parliament. That is what we have managed to achieve, and that's why I supported it.
Thank you. One very brief comment.
My question's for Kate Hart. In the next People's Vote referendum, your campaign for Remain, will you invite your leader, Jeremy Corbyn, to join you?
No.
Thank you. Right, let's move on. Next question. I know, while we're just getting the microphone to the next questioner, which is Elisha. I know John said he's seeing, but we do need to allow the candidates to speak. Thank you. Next question.
How will you guarantee that in a Remain constituency you best represent your constituents?
Thank you. So Sid, start us off on this one.
Okay, well, our policy is that we will guarantee a second referendum between 5 and 10 years after we've left. So that everybody, the idea of this, believe it or not, I'm shocked that people here do not believe in democracy. I believe in democracy, and I believe that we have to uphold the democratic vote of 2016, and we will offer the people of this nation another vote when there is evidence of what's happened. I do not believe that when we leave the European Union we will fall off a cliff, it will be a disaster. I believe we can make a success of it. And I believe this nation will be stronger outside the European Union than it has been inside. And we will see. See, if we have a second referendum before we leave, what evidence is there? It's just conjecture on both sides. One side saying it will be a disaster, the other side being a success. But if we have a second referendum 5 to 10 years after we've left, there will be evidence that people can make a decision and we can reunite the nation. That's our view.
I'm going to be quite short on this one because in a Remain constituency, with me as a Remain candidate, I think that's a pretty simple one. Yeah, I do think that the people have to have their say on Brexit. And now we've got a lot more facts, we know a lot more what Brexit means. So the people must say. Now, if that meant a Liberal Democrat majority going from 21 seats to 320 something, then that's a pretty clear mandate to stop Brexit. However, if that doesn't happen, then we absolutely have to have a people's vote. And we have to make sure that the shenanigans of 2016 are not repeated. Now we know a lot more about that. But absolutely, I will be your representative. I will be there to represent your views. And if the people of Hitchin and Harpenden, predictably enough, will vote Remain once again, then I will continue to be very much Remain MP. And if you vote Leave, I might not want to represent that point of view.
I would be representing those who voted Remain, those who voted to Leave, and those who didn't vote at all. And I think it's absolutely crucial that if we are to deal with the other issues, the other critical issues that our country is facing, like decimated public services and a climate emergency, that we find a way of moving forward together. And I really believe that this can only be done with a second referendum. Labour will finalise negotiations on the Brexit deal. It is already working on and put that back to the people within 6 months. That's how confident we are that we're there. And as I said, I will campaign for Remain, but it's very important that our elected representative also represents the 40% who didn't vote to Remain.
Yeah, I agree with some of that. I think that it is very difficult because, yes, a majority of this constituency voted to Remain, but as Kay pointed out, there was a minority that voted to Leave. I believe when you're a Member of Parliament, you have to represent everybody. But also what you have to do is you have to look at the mandate on which you were elected. And as I say, in 2017, I was elected in this constituency on a basis of believing that when you have votes, you've got to uphold those votes and respect democracy. As a result, I said I would uphold the results of the referendum. That was the mandate on which I was elected. If elected again, I would seek to continue doing what I've been doing over the last couple of years, which is seek to consult and discuss. I held open meetings to discuss as much as I can, as much as I could, around this issue, and I'll continue to do so. But we have to hold the country together, and that includes this constituency between people who voted Remain and Leave and didn't vote at all.
Very much. Move now on to the climate emergency. We had a lot of questions on this particular issue, and we've selected 3. The first one is a sort of very broad question, and then 2 on specific issues. So if I can invite Alison to share our first question with us.
Hi. Please can you tell me what your policy, what your plans are, locally, nationally, and more widely, to effectively address A, the climate emergency, and B, the alarming loss of biodiversity that we're seeing?
Thank you, Alison. Sam, kick us off.
It would take me more than a minute just to literally list the stuff we've done locally on environment and biodiversity, and it would take me more than a minute to talk about our national stuff. So I'm going to be a bit general here, but I'm going to post the list online. We've got a really strong plan as the Liberal Democrats for the environment because it's the centre of everything we do. It's so important because there is no planet B, and we hear that cliche quite a lot, but it's totally true. We've got a more aggressive plan than any other party you see represented here. We're more ambitious on being carbon zero, for example. We're far ahead of that. Our plan is really pragmatic, it's realistic, it's expert-led, it's based on evidence. I think there's more that we can do, and I think there's more we must do on this issue, because it is the number one issue in our entire world, not just in this constituency, not just in our country. It's a global issue. We need to fight the climate change crisis right now.
Thank you. I'd have to actually disagree with you, Sam. Yours is the best, I'm afraid. Tackling the destruction of our planet is a question of justice for our communities in Britain and those around the world who are bearing the consequences, and also for justice for our children who will have to deal with the mess we are making. In order to address the climate emergency, we need to act now, and we need to act decisively. Labour will use this crucial next decade to act. We need to lead the way locally, nationally and globally. And this means investing in renewable energy, transitioning from dirty industry and creating green jobs, investing in public transport and making our homes more efficient. It means investing in new technology and ensuring our green spaces are protected, all of which are key to Labour's green industrial revolution. It also means reviewing our practices in local government, such as our verge management and use of glyphosates. To national government, where thinking green must become part of our decision making and incorporated into all new legislation.
Well, I think that nationally as a government, what we've actually got a pretty good record of this, and I don't think we shout about it enough. And let me explain how. So this is very important. The UK has decarbonised faster than any country in the G20 since the year 2000. We have the best onshore wind record and offshore wind record in the G7. There is still much more to do. That's one of the reasons why we legislated for net zero by 2050, which for many people, they think is too long. But I can tell you, at the climate change conference that I held in this constituency in Harpenden a couple of months ago, Baroness Brown of Cambridge, who's the deputy chair of the Committee on Climate Change, herself said and has written that even to do it by 2050 is hugely ambitious. There is a reason why very few countries have not done it yet at 2050. I will continue working on that, and locally, what we need to do is we need to protect our chalk streams. I've worked very closely with the Ver Valley Society around that, get more electric cars and various other things. Thank you, Jane.
It's very hard to get to grips with this in 1 minute, but I'd like just to say first that what Sam said is strictly untrue. The Liberal Democrat manifesto says they're going to be carbon neutral by 2045. The Labour manifesto says within the 2030s. As Ben said, the Conservative manifesto is 2050, which itself we're actually not on target for. Our manifesto says we're going to do a lot of work with vehicles. We want a scrappage scheme to get rid of diesel cars, and we want to do a lot to promote electric vehicles. We want to do a lot to promote renewable energy, particularly wind and solar panels and tidal and whatever. That's very important. And we also need to do a lot of work with forestation. We need to reduce deforestation, and we need to be planting a lot of trees, a lot more trees, not only here but also worldwide. I also think it's very important that we hold to the Paris Agreement of 2015. That's something which is an international agreement, and that's certainly an agreement that we would hold to.
Moving on to the next question. Stephen.
The expansion of Luton Airport is unnecessary and will have an adverse impact on the environment in this constituency at a time of climate emergency. Will the candidates vigorously oppose the expansion of Luton Airport, and if elected, use every avenue possible to prevent it happening?
Thank you, Stephen. Okay. It's me, yes. I will absolutely and unequivocally oppose the expansion of Luton Airport. Both our national and local governments have declared a climate emergency, and allowing the expansion of Luton Airport is entirely contrary to the declaration that we must take definitive action to address climate change. We need to create jobs in clean industries, and we need to reduce our air travel, not increase it. I have a lot of campaigning experience, and I'm more than happy to join the fight against the expansion of Luton Airport, whether I'm elected or not.
Well, that's good news from Labour, because it's a Labour-run Luton Borough Council which is seeking to expand Luton Airport, right? So, it's all very well saying I oppose it, but, your party are the people pushing this. It is why I started in my opening statement by talking about Luton Airport and trying to stop Luton Airport expansion, is because I think it is of critical importance to this constituency. I'm already very involved in the campaign. If re-elected, I will continue to be so.
And Luton Airport basically is a European airport. But there are problems within London as a whole because there's a lack of capacity in the airport, which is why we're talking about the third runway for Heathrow. Our solution is to have a new airport in the Thames Estuary, which I believe is actually environmentally friendly and would actually solve the problem of lack of capacity for London. That would be a new 6-runway airport. It could easily be built. The major problem is transport links to the new, what will be to the new airport. You cannot keep expanding Heathrow because it involves getting rid of villages and green open space and whatever. And even if you have a third runway in Heathrow, that isn't going to solve the problem because it'll last for so long. But Luton cannot be looked at just in isolation, in my view. It's got to be looked at as the whole problem for lack of capacity in London.
Well, as somebody who lives underneath the flight path and got woken up this morning by the 2 a.m. DHL flight, it's not going to come as a great shock to you all that I absolutely object to Luton Airport, but not just for my interrupted sleep pattern. Yesterday, the Liberal Democrats in the County Council objected, I know we've got some county councillors here, put a motion in at Hertfordshire County Council to object to Luton Airport expansion, and that motion passed as the Liberal Democrat motion. Luton Airport expansion is now going to be objected to officially by Hertfordshire County Council, and that's something the Liberal Democrats have done. And last year, some of you probably don't know this, but last year I was the shadow portfolio holder at North Herts District Council for transport and parking. In that, Luton Airport was part of the brief, so I've had extensive briefing on their plans, and what it will mean for Hitchin Town Centre is catastrophic, and also for Harpenden to a lesser extent, but particularly for Hitchin. And we're right now in an air quality monitoring area where the air quality is illegally poor, and this will make it 10 times worse. We must stop Luton Airport expansion.
Our final question on climate emergency, and then there should be a time for general comments on the whole thing. Edward.
Will your party use taxation and regulation to reduce road traffic pollution in the UK in the next 5 years?
Ben, would you like to start on that?
I think so, and I hope so. I think it's needed. The question, of course, is how you use the right mix of carrot and sticks to actually achieve your aim. The aim should be, in my judgment, to reduce carbon emissions from vehicles. The things I would do are we should accelerate the move to electric vehicles, but at the same time make sure we're generating more electricity so that the national grid can cope with it. But also what we need to do, and that's a market mechanism, but also what we need to do is we need to work on our public transport. A lot of our public transport is pretty dirty. That's something that district councils, county councils, and national government can do through its procurement. And that's what I'd like to see the government do over the next 5 years.
Thank you. Sam?
I can see a member of my team glaring at me on this one because this is my specialist subject, not just from a political point of view, it's actually how I earn money is research and writing about this. Absolutely, the Liberal Democrats will use taxation and regulation to fight poor air quality. Differing slightly from what Bim just said, it's not just about carbon emissions, it's total vehicle emissions, and there's all sorts of other nasty stuff that comes out of exhaust pipes and other road transport. It's also the brake discs and tyres. I can talk for hours about this, so I'm trying to keep tight on it. Just to say that we've already started work on this in North Hertfordshire. So a Liberal Democrat motion, which I tabled, has seen the council move, will see the council move entirely to ultra-low emissions vehicles. A joint administration thing is put together that the taxi drivers have all been moving towards that direction as well. They're going to get to pay lower licence fees. But we need to look at safer cycling as well, and modal shift, improved public transport. I mean, one of the things we want to see is completely electric buses. And we need to, by sort of 2030 realistically, ban combustion-only cars.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I talked about this a little bit earlier, but completely electric buses are in our manifesto, plus having 100% electric taxis and electric private hire vehicles is something which we can certainly move to. We want ultra-low emission zones, which I think are extremely important to move us down that path. I don't think having sort of taxation schemes to stop people using cars is going to work, but what we need is to focus people's attentions on having vehicles that are less polluting. And absolutely, we also need to improve where we can the public transport. I mean, I have to say that I use the railway an awful lot from Hitchin, and I find the railway service that we have from Hitchin at the moment to London being a fantastic service. I mean, really, it has improved substantially. You can now get a train every 15 minutes from Hitchin, a fast train into the centre of London. And as far as I'm concerned, people complain about railways. We don't need to complain about railways in Hitchin.
Okay, thank you. I didn't think I'd be agreeing with being this but I do agree to a certain extent with what you just said. But in my opinion, the best way to reduce road traffic pollution is clearly to reduce the number of combustion engines on our roads. And we need to encourage people to use other forms of transport, and that means making it easy for them. We must also invest in proper public transport systems, which means reinstating bus routes which have been cut, and improving our railways, as well as increasing funding for cycling and walking, and making sure that these are the best options in our towns and cities. Increased road tax could disproportionately affect those who are least able to afford to make the change, and if we want to make the change, we have to be able to take it with us, not make it punitive. The answer has to be an ambitious target to the end of the sales of new combustion engines, and we are aiming for 2030. And we will invest in electric vehicle charging infrastructure to enable people to make these changes easily.
Short comments from the floor. So, one at the back there. We can go to the back first.
Thank the 7th Hitchin Scout Group for their rushing around.
Thank you very much. We have one MP here who worked for Chris Grayling while he was the Transport Secretary and 2 district councillors. I'd just like to ask what actions they've already taken to support commuters in the local areas of Hitchin and Harpenden.
Can I ask that you respond to that by email later, because otherwise if you all respond, that's it for comments. If we can have comments rather than questions, it's a very valid question.
I can answer it very quickly. The Hitchin Commuters Group has done a video to answer that. So
right, so that's, okay, watch it online, thank you. Comments rather than questions, otherwise we'll get round.
Thank you. Bim, in the Conservative Manifesto, which would really be called Austerity the Sequel, as we have in sorry, very quickly, I'll make it. You have allowed for 3% infrastructure as a maximum, as your Chancellor has said. Therefore, you can't meet your 2050 ambition for decarbonisation. But more importantly, tomorrow there is a national debate on climate change. The only person not at that TV debate, who is not only the leader of the Conservative Party, but also our Prime Minister, is Boris Johnson. So if you are really the party who believes in climate change, why is he not there?
I'm not going to allow Bim to answer that purely because we need to move on. Can I just remind you, comments rather than questions, so that we can get as many people's comments in as possible. Let's move on to some national issues, other national issues now. Question from Duncan Leach.
Duncan's over there.
Thank you. Yeah, my question is inspired by similar inspiration for your going into politics, Kay, which is about the schools. Since my kids started school, I've seen erosion of resources and increasing pressures on staff year on year. It does seem to be that it's the kids in their special needs kind of end of the spectrum in the schools. And we've even seen some schools having to close early in the week across the country, not in this borough, but across the country, for affordability reasons. And I'd like to ask the panel, what are they going to do about it?
Thank you very much, Duncan. We're going to start with Sid this time.
Okay.
Well, I'm afraid I'm going to give some answers to the background because the word keeps being mentioned. In 2010, the national deficit was 175 billion, which means we were spending 175 billion more than we had coming in. That deficit has now been reduced to around 25 billion. Now, you keep going on about austerity, austerity. If we had no austerity, we would not have achieved that success. That success was achieved by reducing revenue spending, but maintaining and increasing capital spending. Now, the other alternative, which is just to carry on spending and who cares about borrowing, you end up like Venezuela. It's exactly the same policies which Chavez and Maduro have pursued. And what's happened? The whole country has now got over 1,000% inflation. There's no health service. The people are starving. That is socialism. Socialism in Venezuela. We can see it. We can see it. And what Corbyn wants to impose on this country is socialism again. He'll take us straight back to our over 175 billion deficit, and it will destroy education in this country.
Okay, would you like to follow up that one then? Thanks, Sid. Austerity in this country has been taking money from children in their schools, in their health service, and in all of our other public services. It is a sin.
You've had to say so. Shut up.
As I said in my introduction, school funding is why I became a campaigner. Labour will reverse the cuts to school budgets and make a once-in-a-generation investment in education. Investment which properly addresses historic underfunding and which will make it possible for all schools to achieve minimum standards of education. And that's things like class sizes and making sure there's a qualified teacher in each room, which actually aren't guaranteed at the moment. These pledges meet the demands of the School Cuts Coalition, with whom I have been working for over a year, and which have not been met by any other party. We will also be investing significantly to make improvements in 16 to 19 education, and I will continue my campaign. Thank you.
Look, we all know that education is of critical importance to all of us, and it is. How do you say it's like that? And it is so important our schools are properly funded. My very first speech in Parliament was about education and actually calling for more school funding. This government now is delivering that from April next year. In this constituency, on average, I think it's about 4.6, 4.7% on average, more per pupil after inflation, in addition to more money for special needs, which, by the way, sir, I do think is needed. I do think we need more money for special needs, and actually to reform the special needs system, because the way each school has to pay £6,000, the first £6,000 of special needs, just isn't fit for a modern world, and I think we need to reform that. It's why I've taken parents from this constituency to meet ministers in the Department of Education to discuss that. And so going forward, I will continue to campaign on that, but also remember this. We can only do this when we have a thriving economy. And if we allow an economy which goes down, no schools will be able to be funded at all.
Thank you. Can we just give candidates a chance to speak? I know emotions can get high, but we're here to listen. And we can't listen if people shout over other people.
To me, it's quite clear that the Conservative Party has been at war with our children, nationally and particularly locally. I mean, you can remember the playgrounds being closed to give the Conservative councillors a pay rise. I mean, that was disgusting. It's quite simple that we have to reverse the school funding cuts. They're extreme, they're damaging our children, and that's damaging our future. And it's not just a little headline you might see in a newspaper. This is real world. So if you know Ickleford School, just north of Hitchin, they've had all sorts of problems there with the buildings that have almost fallen apart and some of the systems in there. And I know Councillor North is at the back here, and when he let me know about what was going on there, we worked together as two Lib Dem councillors to move that agenda up, because the county council had become so complacent. And it really highlights, one of the things the Liberal Democrats are going to be doing is we're introducing a £7 billion infrastructure fund for our schools. So we've got proper classroom and proper facilities for learning. We've also got a great education programme, which I can't do in the time, but we're also going to put an extra £10.5 billion of funding into the education programme.
moving on to our next question, which is about health. And it's Dr. Thomas Gillen.
Over here.
Good evening. I'm working as a GP. For our practice to survive, we've had to innovate by using nurse practitioners, pharmacists, physios and a mental health nurse to replace retiring GPs. How does your party plan to increase appointments at local GP surgeries over the next 5 years, given that full-time equivalent GP numbers are falling?
Sam, Dr. Gillen.
This is a really important issue because there is a clear shortage of GPs. On average, it's a 2-week wait to get a GP appointment, and in some places a lot worse than that. And it clearly shows that there is a shortage. But it takes 12 years, I'm told. I'm looking across at the doctor to nod his head. Yeah, it's about 10 years apparently to train a GP from scratch. Now, that leaves us with a big problem going forwards. And the only way we're going to be able to fill that gap is by importing that talent from overseas. And if Brexit happens, we're going to have a very difficult problem doing that. And it's not just doctors. There are 40,000 nursing vacancies right now in the UK. We're not going to be able to fill those vacancies if we leave the European Union. That's just a fact. So the Liberal Democrats have a really detailed health policy. We're going to put a penny in the pound on income tax, and just for the NHS, and look to introduce a new NHS-specific tax programme. However, there's so much more we need to do. We need to work with the doctors and find out exactly the right way to do this, and that's our commitment to everybody who works in health professions.
Okay, well, but personally I have to say that I quite like the GP fund holder scheme which used to exist, and I think actually giving GPs more power within the whole health system would encourage more GPs to stay in the profession. But absolutely we need to recruit more, and how we're going to recruit more will presumably is going to have to be through paying GPs more. We've either got to pay them more or give them more incentive, one or the other. If I can just say very briefly on the general point, I think health, the health service generally is extremely important. It's very important that we keep funding it and that we maintain funding on the health service. What the Labour Party are proposing in getting rid of competitive tendering out of hospitals is going to actually throw the NHS into total chaos. And competitive tendering is something which is actually imposed by the EU. So if you actually say, we want to stay in the EU, we want to get rid of competitive tendering, you're actually contradicting yourself. Competitive tendering leads to enormous savings.
Thank you. Kate.
Thank you. If we want to resolve the NHS crisis, we need a plan to fix primary care. In line with the recommendations of the Chair of the Royal College of GPs, we will expand GP training places to 5,000 a year. There is a recruitment and retention crisis in the NHS. I spoke to a matron at Lister Hospital at the weekend who told me that she regularly works 4 hours past the end of her shift to ensure that there was a safe handover between staff and to make sure her parents received the best possible care. It's been revealed that NHS workers work over 1 million hours a week unpaid overtime because resources are so stretched. This is a disgrace. Labour will fund the NHS properly by increasing investment by an average of 4.3%, which is 26 billion a year. 6 billion more than the Conservatives. We will reinstate the nursery bursary, extend this to midwives and allied health professionals, and invest in mental health care, especially for young people.
Well, thank you for your question. So it's a very serious one. As son of a doctor and pharmacist, I sort of literally grew up in the NHS, especially my parents didn't have anyone to look after me, and I'd be sort of cast around in hospital waiting rooms and various other things. You make a serious point. There are a couple of things. First of all, yes, we need to fund it more. Every party's proposing funding it more, but you will know that it's not just the funding, it's the structures. We need more availability of doctors. Everybody said that. That's obvious. But there also needs to be much more inventive about how we manage demand of people into GP surgeries, because you will know that that isn't necessarily managed very efficiently. Some people that really need to be in the GP can't get them, and some people who don't necessarily need to be in the GP can't get are in there. That's partly about providing for a more effective primary care system, but it's also about GPs also maybe doing more things at different times to accommodate working parents, etc. They're the sort of things that we need to do.
Moving on now to our next question, which is on our food banks. So Trish Bonnet. Everyone right over there. Run.
Our local food banks are seeing a constant increase in usage over the years it's been open. Nothing the current government has done has led to a reduction in the need for food banks across the country. What plans does your party have to ensure the reduction of food banks and their usage in this area and across the country as a whole?
Would you like to start on this one?
Thank you. The fact that families and individuals are having to use food banks in this country in 2019 is absolutely disgraceful. And it has been as a result of the crippling austerity inflicted as a political choice by this government. It is inequality at its worst. Labour will scrap universal credit and design an alternative system that treats people with dignity and respect. And we will immediately suspend the vicious sanction regime. We will scrap the bedroom tax, increase labour housing allowance and rapidly introduce a real living wage of £10 per hour. We will scrap the benefit cap and the two-child limit, and we will pay childcare costs up front so that parents aren't forced to turn down work or get in debt to pay for childcare, as well as ensuring secure tenancies for renters. We will eradicate in-work poverty, and we will make food banks a thing of the past.
Yeah, so as I see it, there are two main aspects to the rise in food bank use. You have a lack of income from people, and you also have an increase in demand that coincides with that. In terms of the income, we are putting in a real living wage that will be over £10, and that's an important commitment, higher than was ever done under a Labour government. I think that will help. I also think that one of the biggest things that we have got wrong in this Parliament is the way that we've implemented universal credit. When Amber Rudd became DWP Secretary, she actually made a huge amount of effort into repairing some of those problems. I think that they have been ironed out to some degree, though they need to improve, and I think that that will make a difference. But I also think that we need to be honest. Whenever we hear, and this is just a general point, whenever we hear things that say we're going to spend more money on this, spend more money on this, we do need to be as realistic as we can when we listen to people's promises. And fundamentally, the way people won't use the food banks is if they have more money, and that's what we're going to try and do.
Well, we as Liberal Democrats, we have a plan to tackle poverty and inequality in this country, which is obviously driving that food bank use. And as Kay's absolutely right, it's disgusting that people are having to use these food banks. It's not right. So we need to build a safety net for people who really need it. And so that's why the Liberal Democrats are going to put £6 billion into it to make a benefit system that actually works. And we clearly need a substantial and significant reform of the universal credit system. You know, this 5-week wait people have to get their money is absolutely outrageous, and that's got to go. That's got to be changed. But we need to invest in other things as well, because one of the things the Liberal Democrats have put in our manifesto, and it's a really important point on this, is we're introducing, and I couldn't quite believe this didn't exist previously, a legal right to food. The fact that we have to legislate for that is outrageous, and we're going to do it. We need to get rid of this, you know, the benefits cap, that's got to go. I mean, there's so many more. The bedroom tax, that's got to be removed. So we need to completely reform and rethink this system because it's not working for people, and it's really important we make it work.
I'm glad to say that I've been involved in running a food bank for many years, and thank goodness we run them. And because I run them, I know exactly why people go to food banks. The first thing is that we are the only party that will restore the 12 billion cuts to benefits. And that's the cause of the problem. It was George Osborne that cut 12 billion from the benefit system. And Ian Duncan Smith, who introduced universal credit, said the only problem with universal credit is the cuts. And there's nothing whatsoever in Labour's costing manifesto or in the Lib Dem manifesto to restore the benefit cuts. We've got to restore the benefit cuts if we're going to solve the problem of food bank usage. Another problem is prisoners. There's a lot of prisoners that are coming out of prison, and while they're in prison they lose their accommodation and they're just left on the streets and they end up coming to food banks. We will work with prisoners when they leave prison to make sure they've got somewhere to live, they've got accommodation. We will also ensure no one will be taken off benefits without having money to live. If we were in power, benefit sanctions would disappear.
Moving on to our next question, which is around sort of social care. David Joseph.
David Joseph's here.
Yes.
Yes, thank you, David. Over there.
Thank you very much. Disabled people, young and old, tend to be a forgotten group in our society. Here in Hitchin, and indeed throughout Hertfordshire, the families of some of our most severely disabled children were left devastated when Nascot Lawn Respite Centre down in Watford was closed in 2018 simply due to NHS cuts. It has not been replaced. Meanwhile, places for children, as we heard a bit earlier, with special needs in both mainstream and special schools are incredibly hard to come by. So I ask, what will each candidate do, please, to try and make life a little bit more comfortable, at least, for disabled people, young and old, living here in Hitchin?
Thank you, David. Ben.
Well, thank you for that, David. I know your family has personal experience of this. The truth is that we need more spaces in more special schools, but within mainstream education we need more provision. So I talked earlier about how we need to, part of why we need to increase school funding is the huge rise in numbers of children with special needs, and actually that impacts children who don't have special needs, because of course then resources are then moved around. So I think that is an integral part of what we need to do. But also, and this is a Hertfordshire-wide issue, not just in this constituency, we need to really be honest and say a significant increase in funding needs to come into that particular part of the system, because Herts County Council does their best, but they just don't have the money. And so I would advocate, and I have already been advocating, that we absolutely need a specific fund specifically for disabled children, because I think that can make a huge impact.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Actually, Bim, I have to disagree with you. In mainstream schools, it is not children without special educational needs who are impacted by funding cuts because of special educational needs funding. It tends to come from the unring-fenced pot of special educational needs funding that is then needed to fund normal resources for the rest of the school. With regards to NASCOT, I think it's actually really vital that we fight to have it replaced, and so that's what I'm going to do. After this, I'm going to go and talk to David and I'm going to see what we can do, because I think it's something that is absolutely crucial for our society, for our community. We need to, the school cuts again, we need to reverse it. We need to make sure that we have better and more funding for children with special educational needs. And in terms of disabled people within our communities at large, I think the most important thing is to go and listen to them and to make sure that when we look for changes, that we actually ask them what's important and what will work for them, so that they're engaged and included in the change, that the change actually benefits those.
I've had a child who was dyslexic, and it's very difficult in the system to get, for people in that situation, to get the support they need. They need, unfortunately, a certain amount of one-to-one teaching, and that's the only way in which they're actually going to come through it. There must be money. There must be money in the budget to support people with special educational needs. In terms of disability in general, I think the biggest problem is going back to the last question, is benefit sanctions and the test that is applied to whether somebody's disabled or not. You see, they send disabled people to a doctor and say, is this person fit to do any work? And the doctor says, yes, they're fit to do any work. They then send them down to the job centre. And if the person who's sent down happens to be mentally ill, then they probably don't even turn up at the job centre, and then they're immediately taken off benefits and they've got no money to live on. And the whole definition, the whole test has to be changed. It has to be, are you fit to do work which you are qualified to do?
I'm going to be quite brief on this one because Kay's actually said most of what I was going to say. So I think I largely agree with Kay. And that's what should never have been closed. It does need replacing. And we need to work with the parents that require that service. And I'm happy to work with you on that, and we'll work together to do that. And I hope other parties will be willing to jump in on that as well. We do need to increase funding for SEN and reverse the Conservative Party's cuts in that area, and do that urgently, because I was talking to the head teacher of the primary school late last year, and he was telling me that that's the biggest area that they need more funding, and we need to work on that. Just in sort of a more general, just to address a couple of points that Sid made, the Liberal Democrats are going to reinstate the Independent Living Fund, and on top of that, we're going to end the work capability assessment and replace it with something that's actually fit for purpose and not so brutal on those people.
Thank you. Moving on to our next question. John.
The next question came from a young man with a mental health condition, and it was a very long question. We're going to reduce it to one sentence. But he was struggling with his benefits and his own status as a person and the medication he needed. And he put the question, who should get free prescriptions?
So Sid.
Oh, well, I have to confess that as somebody over 60, I get free prescriptions. So I suppose it's nice that, that there's no means test applied to free prescriptions. Whether it's justifiable for people who have, because they're over 60, they get them free, I'm not entirely certain. But at the end of the day, drugs are incredibly expensive, and whether we like it or not. And I know Jeremy Corbyn goes on and on about the profits that drug companies are making, but GlaxoSmithKline, our biggest drug company, actually spends £4 billion per year on research into drugs. So we have to understand that drugs are expensive, and it's unreasonable just to be handing out loads of free prescriptions if people don't really need them. So we have to look at the need when giving free prescriptions.
The current process of prescription charges is inefficient and it's inconsistent. I think, as well as everybody who already gets free prescriptions, it certainly needs to be extended to everybody who's got any sort of chronic condition, and that includes people with mental health. It's a difficult one to see how far you can expand it, because there is a cost implication of it. And I think when we've introduced this new NHS tax, we will be able to fund a lot more free prescriptions for a lot more people. But the money has to come from somewhere, and that's why the Liberal Democrats, with our Cost-It manifesto, we show you where we're spending those tax increases that we're going to bring in. And this is one area that we definitely need to look at a little bit more.
Thank you. In my opinion, everybody should have access to free prescriptions. Healthcare should be a universal human right. It should not depend on whether you are able to pay for it. The Labour Party has a plan to develop our own drugs company, which will considerably bring down the cost of drugs once they come out of their period of copyright, or whatever the word is in medical terms. And I think this is a massive step forward in making this an actual realistic possibility.
The answer as to who should get free prescriptions really should be whoever needs them. And if there are people who have chronic conditions but can afford to pay for them, then they should pay for them. If there are people with chronic conditions who can't afford for them to pay for them, then they should have them free. But I do want to take up some of this that I've heard. Some of this is really nonsense. I mean, the Liberal Democrats' proposal on £1 on income tax, to give you the sense, that's about £6 billion. That is probably about 2 to 3% of the NHS budget. And there's a hell of a lot that seems to be funded from that sort of £1 on income tax. So you've just got to be wary of all these promises. And in relation to free prescriptions for everybody, that would be incredibly wasteful. There is a reason why the very first Labour government in 1945 got rid of that policy, right? Because it was very wasteful. So yes, it is much easier in a room in an election period to say we should give free prescriptions to everybody, but we do have to look at who needs it.
Thank you, Bill. We actually have a minute for comments, so very quick comments, not questions. Yep. Yes, gentleman here.
I understand for a doctor I was talking to at the weekend that so many people already get free prescriptions, and there is an admin cost in actually working out who should pay and how much, that actually it would cost very little to give free prescriptions to everybody.
You made the comment that people that can afford to pay for prescriptions should do so if they can afford them. How do you assess how people can afford them? The cost of drugs. I've got a friend who's suffering with cancer. His annual cost is £56,000. He's got insurance cover for some of that. Him and his wife are funding the rest. As soon as he loses the insurance cover, as soon as he loses his job, he has no insurance cover. He then has to face the full cost of that. That's just not possible without selling his home. That's wrong. Where do you draw the line?
Thank you. As school mental health lead in a local secondary school, the biggest challenge that I face is that education, health and social care don't talk to each other at a ministerial level. And I'd like you to guarantee, whoever gets in, that you will make sure that health, social care and education, all the ministers are working together to make the green paper work, because it won't whilst we're working separately.
Thank you. We move to our next question from Alison Smith. Alison, would you like to show where you are? Is Alison here?
She's here, oh yes.
Oh, Alison's at the back. You need to run to the back.
She's right at the back. People will not put themselves in the place.
Good evening. We have already touched on this a little bit, but succinctly, could you tell me, how does your party propose to fund or to increase funding for our public services?
Right, so in a minute, tell us how public. Sam?
First one, stopping Brexit. That would be a start. Because Finn clearly wasn't listening, depending on the pound and income tax, it's just a temporary measure. We will be introducing an NHS ring-fenced tax, which is bigger than that. We're going to be raising corporation tax to 20%. We're going to abolish the separate capital gains tax allowance. We're going to have the air passenger duty, so you're going to get a bit of tax revenue from that from frequent flyers. We're going to look at a few other tax rises, abolish the marriage tax allowance, and one of the little ones that we've got in there, we are a little bit different type of parties on, we're looking to legalise marijuana, and that will bring in billions of pounds in duties and revenues. It may be a controversial one, but it also gives thousands of savings for health and youth. So you can look at all of this, it is all in our fully costed manifesto, how we raise the money and what we're going to spend it on. So you can have a look at that online, it's all there.
In essence, how we're going to fund our increases in funding our public services is a mixture of increased revenue through the growth in the economy and modest tax rises, or at least the delayed introduction of tax cuts in certain areas where they don't necessarily generate economic growth, and also slightly increased borrowing, which we can do at a low rate because of our good management of the economy. And the way how we will manage to increase borrowing to make sure that things don't get out of control, which will happen if you get Labour or Liberal Democrats running the country, is that we will guarantee that our debt to GDP ratio will continue to fall by the end of the next parliament. So if it's a 5-year parliament, we'll have a lower debt to GDP ratio by the end, but yet within that envelope, we can still borrow a bit more money in addition to raising more money through revenue. That's how we'll do it.
Thank you. Sid?
Yeah, our policy is to introduce a turnover tax which will operate like a sales VAT. So at the moment when you buy something you pay 20% VAT, but the seller pays nothing. We would make the seller pay 5%. We'd have the same threshold as the VAT threshold, which is 85,000, and we would offset it against corporation tax. So it would be particularly targeted at companies that don't pay corporation tax, like Google and Facebook and Amazon and Apple and Microsoft and all these people that send all their profits abroad so they pay no corporation tax. And we reckon we can save through this, we could raise through this some 32 billion. I've already told you we would spend 12 billion of that restoring the benefit cuts. We would spend some money on strengthening marriage and the family. We would also spend 15 billion halving commercial rates. The Liberal Democrats have said that they will scrap commercial rates, but they haven't told us where they're going to get the 30 billion from. We've told you where we'll get 15 to halve it, and we would over time try and phase it out completely.
Okay, thank you. Labour has just proposed to increase funding for our public services. It plans to rebuild them after a decade of austerity and savage cuts. This is our funding real change document, which is available online, and it fully details how we are costing every single promise we make in this, which is a printed out version of our manifesto because they're so popular, they're out of stock. I'm not going to go into all the details of the different amounts of money. What I will tell you is that we know that funding is not sufficient. We have to tackle the recruitment and retention crisis in the NHS and education, which means reversing the public sector pay cap, investing in training and putting employee welfare centre stage. We will reverse a decade of cuts to police and vital public services, rebuilding the whole police workforce, recruiting more police officers, police community support officers and police staff. And we will halt the cuts and further invest in our fire and rescue service, recruiting at least 5,000 new firefighters. And we will do this by taxing those at the top to properly fund the services we all rely on.
Jenny Nicholson was going to ask our next question, but unfortunately she's done well, but I think it's going to be asked on her behalf by Ian. Yeah.
Ian's there.
Thank you. The level of personal debt in the UK currently stands at £217 billion, the highest ever. Do you agree that there should be a cap on interests and also on charges to end the debt trap for millions of people?
Yes, thank you. Absolutely, I completely agree with you. I'd really like to see an end to payday lenders and unscrupulous loan companies, and I thoroughly support Labour's plans to cap the total amount that can be paid in overdraft fees or interest on a loan. We want people to succeed. Spiralling or unconquerable debt prohibits this, and it really must be addressed.
We need to build a more compassionate culture towards those in debt, and it's something I've already done some work on with our administration partners at North Arts District Council, looking into this area, because it's really important to a lot of people. Not everybody does have the, it is a big problem, as we've heard, in the country. We should be looking at those overdraft charges. You're absolutely right. I mean, I've suffered from them in the past. I mean, I've not always had a lot of money to go on, and I know exactly what this debt problem is all about, and the payday loans. I mean, I've been there. I've suffered from this. And I've got out of that, and it's not good for those who can't do it. So, yeah, I completely agree. I think there should be a cap on this, and I know it's not in the Lib Dem manifesto, but that's me speaking. I think we should be doing this, and that's something I'm going to fight for in Parliament if you give me the chance.
As in my last 2.5 years, I've served as chair of the all-party parliamentary group on credit unions. Credit unions are really, really important. We need to give credit unions more power so that they can actually do more, so that people do not have to go to these ghastly, awful payday loan companies. So yes, should we have a limit on interest? Yes, we should. Should more people be able to access high-quality credit unions in this area and across the country? Yes. And that's what I've been working with people, credit unions, hundreds of them all over the country over the last 2.5 years to try and increase, and that's what we should do.
This is a difficult area, but certainly it is in our manifesto that we will put a cap on interest that is chargeable. because it's wrong that some people, I mean, these payday loan people, 463%. I mean, we should be looking at no more than 20 times the back base rate in terms of some sort of national maximum interest that is chargeable, which I think would be quite reasonable. We also need to look at the advertising. I think there's too many people that are encouraged to take on more and more debt for one reason or another, particularly credit cards, which they'll just advertise, you know, will give you 0%, and then of course the 0% runs out after a certain length of time, and then suddenly the very high rate of interest kicks in. So we need to have a look at the advertising and people being lured into debt, and how we can reduce that. I've spent most of my life as a financial advisor, so I absolutely believe that managing finance is something that we need to be training people on and encouraging them.
A couple of comments from the floor. Anybody would like to comment? Is there, yeah, people who haven't had a chance. Yep. At the back. So one at the back and one at the front here. We start at the front here, that's where the microphone is then.
Is it on? Oh, yeah. Sam, I think as a Lib Dem, it's a bit of a joke that you're decrying loans. I'm a student, thanks to the £9 grand in debt every year. I really appreciate it. That you want rent increases in line with inflation every year. It's actually in your manifesto that you want rent increases. Like, what the hell? On top of that, there's a loan to rent. You're proposing a loan to get onto the rental ladder. For people like me, I'll never own a house. I don't see how getting into more debt in order to rent a house would actually help me at all. I think really you need proper controls on rent prices, and that is not in your manifesto. You're just encouraging more debt.
To the back and towards down.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to make a very, very small point about giving credit where credit is due. And nobody on the panel mentioned the astonishing work that Stella Creasy MP from the Walthamstow has done over several years on payday loans and legislation to prevent it. And since none of you will, I want to give her credit. So let's hear it for Stella Creasy, because she worked with us.
Okay, let's move on to the next question, which is from Anton. Anton, can you make yourself known? Right. Quicker.
Does anyone deserve to be a billionaire?
Here, she didn't quite catch that. It's a short question. Does anyone deserve to be a billionaire? Billionaire. Can't have said it. Bim.
I don't have any problems with people being a billionaire, as long as they've worked for it and they've done it legally and honestly. I think that that's completely fine, because I think to say that you're going to put a limit on people's ambition or their aspiration for the future, I don't believe helps us as a society. There we are.
Thank you. Sid.
I'm afraid the reality is that almost all billionaires employ an enormous number of people and run businesses, and obviously to get to that position they've got to be extremely successful businesses. What we've got to do is to have a fair tax and a fair way of taxing them, making sure, as I said earlier, people like Facebook and Amazon, all these people who aren't paying tax in the UK at the moment are paying tax. But we can't stop ambition. It's wrong to stop ambition. And if you start saying, oh, we're going to get rid of billionaires in this country, they'll go somewhere else and they'll employ the people that they're now employing in the UK in another country. So it's a wrong way of looking at things, getting rid of billionaires.
This wasn't about getting rid of them, it was about whether anybody deserves to be one. Did you know that if you earn £1 every 10 seconds, it would take you 317 years to earn your first billion? And I don't believe that anybody needs or deserves to be that wealthy.
No, I don't think anybody deserves to be a billionaire, but we should all have the opportunity to be able to enrich in our lives by working hard. But billionaires that do exist, they do need to pay a fair share. They need to pay their share of taxes. And as we all know from things like the Panama Papers, well, maybe Dim's part knows a bit more about this than ours, that not all of them do pay their full amount. But I saw a story recently about someone called Kylie Jenner, who is a famous person and the world's youngest ever billionaire. And I found that really depressing, actually, because it seems that people are sort of focusing on this number as that's their life goal, to become a billionaire, and that's not the way that it should be. We should focus on things that are a bit more important in your life, and that's one of the things that I quite like with jumping back to Lib Dem policy here. One of the things we're doing is introducing this fund for adult education, so people can enrich in their lives and work through it. But I don't think they should all aspire to be billionaires. They just aspire to be the best they can be and be happy. That's what life's about, isn't it?
On to the next question, and then we'll be able to have some time at the end of that question for comments. So, the next question, I think you're posing, John, from Christian Aid Group.
Yeah, we only had one question on international affairs, interestingly. Then maybe on national, which probably makes sense. And this came from a group of people who done Christian Aid in this town for many, many years. And they've asked, the lady who asked is out of the country at the moment, will you ensure that a minimum of 0.7% of gross national income will be spent on aid every year, and will you give your priorities for the use of this money?
Sam,
Yes, exactly that figure, which is a little bit surprising. Yes, 100%, 0.7% is what it says in the manifesto. I think maybe we could actually do a bit more than that. We'd be looking at fighting poverty, defending human rights internationally, it's really important for us to do, protecting the environment, as I said, it's the centre of everything we do, and preventing conflicts globally, because that creates so many other problems. I also would like to see a lot more effort being put into education schemes internationally, because that's so important to educate the world. As we have to in the UK as well. And it's something I've seen travelling a lot. I've travelled a lot of the world in various hats on, and I've got Nigerian roots, and I spent a lot of time in Lagos and Port Harcourt working with the Igbo people who were working there, some of them living and working in scrapyards. And that's a British Commonwealth country, and these are people who are super intelligent, super hardworking. With a little bit of education funding, they could become a great powerhouse for the whole of Africa, and that's something Britain could lead and help with.
Thank you. Start again, please, all the time. Quite simply, yes, that is also exactly the amount that we have in our manifesto as a minimum, 0.7% gross national income. And I really support the Labour Party's pledges to introduce the reduction of inequality as a goal for all aid spending alongside existing poverty regulation and gender equality goals. Humanitarian aid must be provided according to need, not whether the UK has commercial or other interests in the country. Priorities. Is it still going? One of my priorities would be increased investment in women's grassroots organisations and in the basic right to education, health and clean water. And I think that's something we probably will support, but it really is absolutely vital if we want the rest of the world to succeed, which effectively is what we need to do and what we really need to be pursuing. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry. I think when it comes to the third world, we've got to think about fair trade is actually more important in some ways than aid, because what we've got to do is to help these countries build their economies, and we've got to have an opportunity as we leave the European Union to make trade deals with African countries and a lot of other poor countries. And at the moment, the trade deals which the European Union have offered them in many cases have been absolutely terrible. Well, I mean, they're basically just down to exploitation. But we've got to help countries build their economies so that they can provide for themselves, and that's extremely important. One of our key policies is to tie aid to the persecution of Christians. So, for instance, we give £441 million at the moment in aid to Pakistan, and we would not allow that to just continue unfettered if they continue to put people in prison, like Ashley Bibi, for instance, who said, "What's Muhammad done for you? Jesus Christ died on the cross for my sins," and she was in prison for 8 years for saying that.
then Bill.
I'm very glad that all the parties support Conservative Party policy. We were the party to legislate for the 0.7% GDP for international aid. I'm very proud of that. In the last couple of years, last year, served as ministerial aid to Rory Stewart when he was Secretary of State in International Development, and also Penny Mordaunt before him. And one of the things that I discussed this a lot with Rory, was how we were going to shift a lot of our aid spending, not stopping poverty alleviation or education programs or health, all those things are key, but also on fighting climate change and the effects of climate change in a lot of these countries. That's critically important. But another thing is economic development. Because ultimately, if you keep giving aid to a country that they can't develop their own markets and can't develop their own systems really properly, then they'll be in aid forever. Economic development is key. That's another priority that I have for that 0.7, and I'm very glad the Conservative Party, not any other party, introduced it.
Any comments from the floor? Yes, one there? Lady there? That's it, great. Maybe we can get the microphone and more comments we can have.
Thank you very much. Just to link this question with the last question, I think the issue is not so much whether or not people deserve to be billionaires, but that people's circumstances of birth in Britain and elsewhere in the world completely vary their opportunity to become billionaires, and that is what political parties should be seeking to address.
Comments, not questions. Can I suggest to everybody, panel and everybody here tonight, that you all watch the 3-part Netflix documentary about Bill Gates and what he's been doing for charity. Or he's been putting money into eradicate polio, he's been building a toilet for the third world, and he's built a nuclear power station that runs on waste fuel. It's brilliant. Go and see what billionaires do for the planet. He's going to do more than our overseas aid budget, but we'll never do.
Thank you very much. And a question over here. So if you keep your hand up, sir, then that's it.
Thank you very much. As a primary school head teacher, I see every day the impact that austerity and budget cuts on our public services have had. I'm fascinated by some of the responses from the platform, from those who talk as though they're about to fix all of that, when in fact they are the cause of all of that. Mr. Abdulani, you speak as if you haven't been responsible for a Conservative government that has led us to this situation where I am unable to replace vital staff in my school, and it's having a direct impact on the quality of provision that I can give to all of the children. And I think we also need to bear in mind that much of this was started in the coalition government, and the Liberal Democrats who look to themselves and think about their own voting record and such.
We're going to move to our last two questions now, which are not questions so much of policy, but questions of how you would be our local constituent MP. So if I can ask David Rogers to ask the first of those two questions.
Thank you very much. Good evening. Hello, panel. A question for all of you, if I may. One thing that characterised the last Parliament was a much greater willingness on the part of many MPs to do what they felt was right, rather than just what their party wanted them to. So can I ask each of you to give one example of one policy position your party holds where either you have in the past or would in future oppose your party, where you felt that was the best thing for your constituents and the country? Thank you.
It's difficult for me to answer this question because, as some of you probably know, I'm the leader of the party and very much involved in putting together the manifesto. So it's very hard for me to come here and say, well, what I've decided will go in the manifesto, I will then oppose. But I believe... What I would say, however, is that all our policies are highly principled, and we are standing on highly principled issues, and we do not compromise. We stand for what we believe. We stand for what we believe is right for the nation, what is right for everybody, and I will stand for what I believe is right for Hitchin, for this community here, and I'll do that without compromise.
For me, there are actually two. One is on the last question, which was about 0.7% aid. I think that is critical, and if the government were to vote back on that, I would vote against it, despite whatever the government said. And another issue is a very local one, which is around Luton Airport expansion. Now, it isn't government policy for Luton Airport expansion, but if it became government policy to expand Luton Airport, I'd vote against it and do whatever I could to try and prevent it if it got to that stage.
Thank you.
I'm really struggling with this question, actually, because I've been back and forth through the manifesto to find something I want to discuss. Now, would I rebel against the party on something that was best for Hitchin in a heartbeat? I'm just struggling to find anything in the manifesto that where this would come up, and at the moment I haven't actually found that, which makes me sound like a complete party lucky, which is not what was. I wanted to come up with a really good answer to this, and I've struggled with this one. It's a lot to do with the way the Lib Dems make party policy. We've got a very consultative process. So we're working on policies that won't be announced now for another 3 years. So I'm already feeding into stuff that we're working on for 3 years' time. So I have an impact and a say on it. At that point, there was something to do with our trident replacement policy that I got changed because I didn't think going for a light nuclear weapons system was a very good sensible thing to do, and I want to get rid of nuclear weapons. So I changed our policy and got that through. So that's the way I've worked on things. So I can't give you an exact answer. I'm really sorry, which is a bit rubbish of me. I apologise for that.
Thank you. I'm afraid I'm going to say exactly the same as Sam. I've been through the manifesto, and I am yet to find a Labour Party policy currently, either nationally or locally, that I believe would be against the best interests of residents in Hitchin, Harpenden, or the country. Much like the Liberal Democrats, our policy is formed and informed and developed as a result of something called a National Policy Forum, which enables many experts in their fields, teachers, economists, energy workers, solicitors, doctors, scientists and artists, to influence the way that policy is developed, which means it's led by experts, not by career politicians in Westminster who haven't the faintest idea or any relevant experience which qualifies them to make such contributions or indeed to take decisions. So, I vote as a district councillor in the best interest of the residents of my ward and the district, taking their views into account, and I would do exactly the same thing as a Member of Parliament, and I would absolutely vote against the party if I believed it to be in the best interest of the constituents.
And then our final question comes from Elliot Mainwaring.
How will you make sure that your constituents, including young people like myself, feel listened to?
Thank you. By actually listening to them. As a constituent who has been heard but not listened to by my MP, I know what it feels like, and I know what it feels like when concerns go unheeded, requests unactioned, and votes against overwhelming local feeling. If elected, I intend to be a proper constituency MP, which will enable me to spend time with my constituents and to listen to them. In terms of engaging with young voters and making sure their voices are heard, I really want to make sure that we look at things like youth councils in the same way as we have youth parliament. And if I'm elected as an MP, I will set up regular youth surgeries. I want to build and develop relationships further than school funding with our local schools, which will give me the opportunity to actually spend time with young people and listen to their concerns, listen to their aspirations and their views of how we should be moving forward with party policy, and actually make a decision and get going with it, because I don't think that young people's voices, their voices are heard enough. And everything we do for political education and engagement is fantastic.
I'm going to be brief because I sort of addressed this right at the beginning. Listening to you and working for you is our job as councillors and hopefully as your next Member of Parliament. That's what I'm here to do. And as for young people, the best way to listen to the opinions of young people is something that's been Lib Dem policy for forever. I can't actually remember when it was. I certainly wasn't a member of the party at the time, or perhaps even born, but that's introducing votes at 16. So give young people an actual real voice.
What I've sought to try and do, Elliot, as you know, is to spend time with as many young people as I can. I'm always in and out of our schools, whether it be secondary or primary. I also always try and have as many young people with me on work experience. I've had well over a dozen since being an MP, because I think everybody should have the opportunity to see that and play a part in it. And more importantly than all of that, in any sort of setting up youth councils, all the rest of it, which is fine, but actually it's about being as present as I can. That's why I hold as many open meetings as I can. That's why I always try and find as many opportunities as I can to speak to young people, older people, their parents, grandparents, etc. Because the heart of being a member of Parliament is to know and hear and listen to what everybody is saying to you, and that's what I try to do, and that's what I'll continue to do if re-elected.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good answer despite the hisses, I'm sorry, but I'm planning to go into primary school on Friday. I think going into schools and listening to what young people have got to say is what it's all about. And you can't listen and hear what people have got to say unless you put yourself in front of them and hear what they've got to say. I've got a stepson who's at Hitchin Boys School, and I've put myself forward to be a parent governor of that school. In the past, I've been a school governor of a number of different schools and been a chair of governor of schools. So very much seeking to be involved in understanding schools, running of schools. I think that's how you can understand what's going on with young people, and how that you can listen and understand the problems and the needs that they're facing.
On our calculations, we now have 6 minutes for comments from the floor on any topic. So, to reiterate, comments rather than questions, so that as many people can be heard as we can possibly get through. So, comments on any question, on any issues that we've talked about tonight. Let's start. Peter. Yep. Go there.
Could I suggest you start by electrifying the railways?
We are electrifying railways. We've got a lady down here. Yep.
Thank you. I'm a local SINCO and assistant head, and I have 2 doctor siblings, and all of us together want change, but the amount of change that there's been in the recent 15 years that I've been in education has been so much that it's impacting teacher well-being, and the same with colleagues in the NHS, and the same with all the public services. So actually, I'd just like there to be change and then it to stop.
Bim, I'm quite interested to hear that you said you put your constituents first, when I have emailed many times and received one response just after the election was announced with a very generic letter about Brexit.
Yeah, I thought it was quite interesting that the international affairs topic didn't register highly tonight, when there's a rather interesting report on Russia, I believe, and very much like to know what it says.
Gentleman right at the back there, waving his arm. That's it, brilliant.
Earlier people spoke about food banks. The Trussell Trust charity handed out £65 million. £65 million emergency meals over 5 years of cruel austerity.
Right at the back, if you can go sort of using where the hands are at the back there, can you get the microphone through?
The Labour Party criticised for leaving the finances in a terrible state. The Conservatives could equally be criticised for leaving the country in a terrible state. Austerity has saved some money, but it's a very short-term thing, because if you just take one small example of white lines on the roads and road signs. You think that's been cut back for so long that the work in putting it back is going to cost more money. And that's just one example. Take it right across the whole, that's without mentioning public sector funding or anything like that.
If we come down here, gentleman here. That's it. No. Quickly run, more comments we can get in.
The most important issue really facing us is climate change. That's the thing that's going to devastate us. None of the parties seem to be prepared to advise all of us how we are going to cut our own personal carbon usage and such like. It's all very well to stop Luton Airport, but some other airport would just be expanded. I mean, as an example, we just have to persuade people they can't, even if they do have the money, they can't take 4 holidays a year flying like here, there and everywhere. The planet can't take it. But no party is actually getting us to face up to the individual choices that we've really got to make.
Thank you there in the back top, and then there's a couple at the back, one on that aisle as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, Sam and Kay seem in quite a lot of agreement on quite a lot of issues, and I just wanted to say it's such a shame that you're splitting the Remain vote, because so many people I know
I would just like to make a point on the international front. There's been nothing said about the divisions in our society this evening, and my main concern at the moment is that we have a huge rise in anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, purportedly. My main concern is none of you have mentioned the atrocities against Palestine, why this has given rise to the feeling of anti-Semitism, because nobody is calling Israel out, and this is causing huge divisions because of the problems in the Middle East it's causing with the neighbouring countries, Syria, Iran, Iraq, Yemen, Saudi Arabia, all involved. I would like you all to really think about how you're going to stop the Israeli involvement in British politics that is being widely reported but not spoken about.
And one last question down at the front here, lady at the front here, and then we'll come to closing statements.
We heard earlier about listening to constituents. Can I just say, a certain MP has been blocking constituents from his Facebook page. So this just shows that he really is not interested in listening to us.
We're going to move now to closing sentences. Each candidate has 1 minute and 1 minute only to tell us why they should be elected. And we're going to go in reverse order from one we began with. So, Kate, your 1 minute starts now.
Thank you. I'm standing for election because I think that, and from listening to people on the doorstep and through my work as a district councillor, that people in this constituency have grown tired of being represented by somebody who doesn't truly represent them, who doesn't listen to them, who doesn't give them a voice in Parliament. I think if we want real change that really benefits local people and that trickles up rather than trickles down, we need a local voice in Parliament and somebody that is truly representative of the constituents for who they are representing. I'm a local resident. I was born in Hitchin. I was raised here, and I'm now raising my own family here, and it really gives me a very deep-rooted understanding of what the issues are. And if we really want proper change, I really believe we need local representation, and I hope you'll give the opportunity to be your voice in Parliament on December the 12th.
Being local is super important. Be engaged, being responsive. We've heard what you said tonight. Listening is so important, and we need to act on that. But right now we're facing these two great crises facing our country. The climate crisis and Brexit. And if you want somebody who is there to fight for you and fight both of those things in Parliament, starting on December the 13th, then please vote for me and the Liberal Democrats.
I am a highly principled person, and we are a highly principled party. We stand for upholding democracy, which is very valuable, upholding the referendum and also allowing a second referendum 5 to 10 years after we've left. We will support marriage and the family by giving grants to encourage people to get married and to go on training before they get married. We will protect the unborn. We will protect the unborn. We will stand for protecting life in the womb from conception until natural death, because we believe that that is right. We will make tax fair by introducing a turnover tax, as I've described, and we will use that money to care for the poor, as no other party will restore the cuts to benefits that we will restore. And we will fight crime by working with ex-prisoners so that when they come out of prison, they've got somewhere to go and somewhere to live. And if they've got drug and alcohol problems, we will help them to cut reoffending rates. They're now 30%. We can cut them below 10%, and we will.
I started by saying that Luton Airport, I think, is the #1 local priority. I will continue to fight that expansion. I will also continue to fight for increased funding in our schools and reform, but not reform that damages the well-being of teachers. I think that's very important, but we do need more funding in our schools, and I continue to fight for that. I'll also continue to fight for sorting out our environment and the climate crisis that we've all discussed this evening. But I want to finish by talking about Brexit. Now, I don't believe that I should represent either the 40% that voted to leave or the 60% who voted to remain. I will represent everybody. And that's what I've sought to try and do. That's what I will continue to do if you re-elect me on December the 12th.
Thank you all very much indeed. It remains to me to close the evening just with some thanks. So firstly, thanks to the candidates for putting yourselves through this. Thank you for everybody who submitted questions for this evening. Particularly thank you to those who shown good understanding as to why we couldn't ask all the questions tonight. Thank you to Christchurch for hosting us and for thank you to 7th Hitchin Scouts. I apologise. Thank you to Elliot and Libby, who were very kind to us. And a huge vote of thanks to John Richardson, who has called all of this.
Thank the Chair, who said, pleasant face, but a core of steel.